Howdy folks, Jabberiki here. It's such a beautiful day in the neighbourhood. Won't you be my neighbour? Let's talk about Fred Rogers. Fred Rogers was a children's entertainer who hosted a TV show on PBS called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He was a remarkable man who redefined kids' television, creating a balance of wholesomeness, education, moral lessons, and whimsy. Unlike a lot of children's TV shows, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was brave enough to explore serious topics like death, war, and assassination, because Fred believed it was important to help kids understand the world around them, even if the truth was scary. Unlike a lot of media trying to reach children, Fred Rogers respected kids. He validated their emotions, feelings, intelligence, patience, and curiosity.
There's so many people who'll just lump them all together and say, hey kids, come along, we'll see the next cartoon. And they couldn't care less about what that cartoon is saying to the child about such things as human dignity.
Also, at a time of racial segregation, Fred had the guts to cast a black actor in the role of a police officer. He was ahead of his time. Each episode was held together by the comforting presence of Mr. Rogers himself, as he calmly went about his day and introduced viewers to things kids would be curious about. But the show would also cut to a segment called Make-Believe Land, Mr. Rogers' fantasy world, where most characters are played by puppets. These puppets were very basic and simple, yet that's what made them so charming. They look like puppets you'd find in a child's toy box. Fred puppeteered and voiced a lot of the characters himself too, bringing them to life so wonderfully that you end up forgetting it's clearly Mr. Rogers behind most of the characters.
I'm really scared. Do you think maybe you could give me a hug?
If you want to learn more about Fred, then I urge you all to check out the brilliant and informative documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbour? In this video, I'm going to be talking about 2 episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, starting with one called Making Mistakes. When this episode begins, Mr. Rogers has to go off for a meeting and a gentleman called Chuck Aber volunteers to take his place for a while. I was nervous whether Chuck could hold the show together, considering how important Mr. Rogers is to it. But surprisingly, I found him to be lovely and charismatic. A very good substitute host.
Can you guess what this is? Does that sound like a chicken?
Replacing Fred with someone else also inspires the episode to touch on a common childhood situation, when parents have to go somewhere and someone else must look after them for a bit. The episode authentically captures real emotions and fears that a kid would have in this situation using a skunk puppet. But Chuck assures the skunk, telling him everything that a scared child would need to hear.
Why did Mr. Rogers have to go away?
Well, why do you think he did?
Because he didn't like me?
Oh, no. He likes you a lot, Mr. Skunk.
Well then, why did he have to leave?
Well, there was something that he had to do, and he had to do it by himself.
Mr. Rogers does eventually return. He then says goodbye to Chuck and introduces the Make-Believe Land segment, in which the skunk accidentally sprays his new friends, but he assures everyone that it was a mistake. Sometimes we can slip up in social situations. It happens. But as long as we say sorry and admit that it wasn't on purpose, then there's not much more we can do. But Fred Rogers realistically acknowledges that guilt is a very strong emotion that you can't simply ignore. It can cloud our thoughts for ages.
I'm very sorry, Lady Evelyn. It was a mistake. The snow was a mistake. Miss Duck startled me, and it was just my natural reaction. I'm really sorry.
Lady Evelyn, one of the only human characters in Make-Believe Land, then agrees to cover up the skunk's smell with a perfume, and she bumps into Daniel Striped Tiger. The two discuss what's happened. Then Daniel starts worrying if he himself is a mistake. Lady Evelyn assures him that that's not true by singing about how much she likes and appreciates him.
I think you are just fine as you are. I really must tell you, I do like the person that you are becoming.
Most shows would cut things off from there, but while Lady Evelyn is singing, Daniel joins in, contrasting her optimism with his self-doubt.
just fine as you are.
I'm not like anyone
really
else.
must tell you, I do
when I'm asleep
like
or
the person
even
that
awake.
you are
Sometimes I get to
becoming.
dreaming that
When
I'm just
you
a
are
fake.
sleeping,
I'm not
when
like
you are waking,
anyone
you
else.
are my friend.
It can be difficult to convince a self-conscious friend that they're awesome, because, well, insecurities are very powerful. But as long as you keep sincerely giving them words of encouragement, then you're a good mate. Lady Evelyn keeps trying to reach Daniel, never getting frustrated at him, because she understands that the journey to self-love is a tough one.
I've never seen a tiger that looks like me.
No,
And I've never heard a tiger that talks like me.
no,
And I don't know any other tiger who lives in a clock
no, neither do I.
or loves people.
Oh, Daniel.
I particularly admire the conviction that Betty Aberlin brings to this scene. She's so believably sympathetic to this old dingy tiger puppet because she knows how important this scene's lesson is and what it will mean to kids watching. The episode ends with Mr. Rogers playing a video about how rubber erasers are made. Now, I personally couldn't care less how erasers are manufactured. It's not a topic I'd go out of my way to research. But Fred Rogers' calming voice and enthusiastic interest makes watching this mundane factory process so relaxing and engaging.
They're put inside this big drum that tumbles them around and around until all their edges are smooth and soft. I wonder what that feels like, to feel all those erasers.
That's what made Fred so great. He could get you curious about anything. So those are my thoughts on the episodes making mistakes. Let's move on to another episode now. This one is called Everybody's Special. The episode opens up with Mr. Rogers introducing his puppets. Now, some may argue that this breaks the magic, but the show always made the distinction that make-believe land was play-pretend. Not to mention, kids are inherently curious, so showing them how puppetry works is perfect for them, answering any questions they might have. Mr. Rogers even shows how kids themselves can make their own puppets, a really great way to inspire their creativity and let them know that they can imitate Mr. Rogers' show in their own way. I also love how Fred fumbles around when puppet building. It makes it feel more natural and less staged. None of that "here's what I made earlier" nonsense. When I was a child, I was completely obsessed with arts and crafts. I would lock myself in my room and just make stuff all day, every day. So I can imagine if I watched this episode as a kid, I would have had a huge epiphany and thought, hey, I can make my own puppets! We then cut to Make-Believe Land, where it's Corny's birthday and everyone has a surprise party for him. Because everything is under wraps though, Corny assumes that no one cares about his birthday. Now, most children's entertainment would play a scene like this for humour, but Fred Rogers finds substance in it. How can you maturely and respectfully pull off a secret surprise party without hurting the birthday person? It's tricky to do this, but it is possible. You can have a surprise party without making the person feel anxious or unloved.
Yes, but I guess I'm not going to do anything for my birthday.
Why not?
Because it's too soon, and nobody has even said a word about it.
Well, some birthdays are so special, they're like surprises.
Meanwhile, Prince Tuesday is feeling upset because he really doesn't want to wear his cape, but his parents insist that that's what makes him royal. However, Chuck Aber assures him that you don't need royalty or titles to be special, because Tuesday is special without his cape. I really love this sentiment, because it teaches kids to value themselves regardless of their social status or wealth, that they are special for being uniquely who they are. The media actually tried to unfairly demonize this message as lazy entitlement, but these journalists clearly missed the point, and their warped interpretation says more about their values than Mr. Rogers. The episode even cuts back to Mr. Rogers, who clarifies what he means when he says everybody's special.
Each one of us is special, and it's because of who we are inside. How about some food for you, fish? You and your family and your neighbors, everybody. We're all different, and we all have something to offer our world.
Every single person, no matter who they are, has the right to feel good about themselves and shouldn't have to reach wealthy success or high corporate stature to prove their worth in this world. It's nothing at all to do with laziness. Mr. Rogers is simply encouraging kids to feel happy about themselves.
And what that ultimately means, of course, is that you don't ever have to do anything sensational for people to love you.
There may never be another Fred Rogers, sadly, but we can carry on his legacy by applying his teachings to our own lives. I'm trying my best to improve as a person and as an entertainer. It's been tough, but I definitely would consider Fred Rogers to be my role model right now. I've been Jamboree, and I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, then feel free to like, subscribe, and share. Also, please consider supporting me by making a monthly pledge to my Patreon in return for awesome rewards. Thank you. So, what am I going to be reviewing in the next episode of Puppet Panic? Well, I do know that there's going to be a brand new Star Wars film, the 9th one, the end to the newest trilogy. So I think I should mark this occasion by reviewing a classic Star Wars film that a lot of people consider to be the best one, The Empire Strikes Back. Cheerio, folks.